The sound of Bella's desperate whimpering still haunts my nightmares. I found my 4-year-old golden retriever collapsed on my kitchen floor, her golden coat soaked with sweat, violent tremors racking her usually graceful body as foam bubbled from her mouth. As a professional dog trainer who'd worked with hundreds of animals over the past decade, I knew these weren't symptoms of any natural illness. But nothing could have prepared me for discovering the truth about my sister.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're a subscriber, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Tell us a duh.
It was a crisp Saturday morning in November when my world shattered into 1,000 pieces. I'd been in my home office in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon, reviewing training schedules for the week ahead when I heard the most heart-wrenching sound imaginable, a cry of pure agony that seemed to pierce straight through the walls of my Victorian-style house. I dropped the stack of client files I'd been organizing, papers scattering across my hardwood floor like fallen leaves, and ran toward the sound that was coming from my kitchen. What I found there will be burned into my memory forever. There was Bella, my beautiful, intelligent golden retriever, the dog I'd rescued as a puppy and trained to be my business partner and constant companion, writhing on the black and white checkered tiles. Her normally bright, alert brown eyes were rolled back, showing only whites that looked ghostly and terrifying. Her powerful legs, which had gracefully demonstrated hundreds of commands for amazed clients, were now kicking frantically at the air, like she was trying to escape some invisible torment. The foam coming from her mouth wasn't the normal drool I was used to seeing after our morning runs or training sessions. This was thick, white, and tinged with something that looked wrong, a sickly yellow color that made my stomach lurch with immediate dread. "Bella! Oh God, Bella, what's wrong?" I screamed, dropping to my knees beside her convulsing form. My hands hovered over her trembling body, afraid to touch her, afraid I might somehow make whatever was happening to her even worse. This was my partner, my best friend, the dog who slept at the foot of my bed every night and greeted me with unbridled joy every morning. Bella had been with me through everything. When I'd started Blair Canine Training Academy 5 years ago in my tiny apartment, she'd been my first demonstration dog, my proof of concept. When my training business had grown successful enough to buy this house, she'd been there to christen every room. When I'd gone through my messy divorce 2 years ago, she'd been my constant source of comfort and stability. This magnificent animal, who could perform 47 different commands flawlessly, who had helped me train over 300 other dogs, who was featured prominently on my business website and social media pages as the face of Blair Canine Training Academy, was now fighting for her life on my kitchen floor, and I had absolutely no idea why. I'd been incredibly careful with Bella's health and safety. As a professional dog trainer, I understood canine physiology better than most veterinarians. I knew every toxic substance to avoid, every dangerous food that could harm dogs, every environmental hazard that could pose a threat. My house was essentially dog-proofed to perfection. The pantry where I kept Bella's premium organic dog food was secured with child-proof locks. All cleaning supplies were stored in upper cabinets she couldn't reach. I didn't keep any toxic plants in my house, no chocolate or other dangerous foods within her reach, no small objects she could choke on. My backyard was fenced and regularly inspected for anything that might harm her. Bella's diet was as controlled as a show dog's, the same high-quality kibble every morning and evening, measured to the exact gram based on her weight and activity level. Filtered water in her stainless steel bowl, changed twice daily. Healthy training treats that I made myself from organic ingredients. Nothing had changed in her routine. Nothing was different about this morning. Except for one thing. My sister Amy had been here. Amy Ashford, my 28-year-old sister, had stopped by unexpectedly around 8 this morning, claiming she needed to borrow my laptop charger because hers had broken and she had an important work presentation to finish. I'd been getting ready for my Saturday training sessions, rushing around gathering equipment and client files. "Just leave it on the counter when you're done," I told her, handing over my spare key. "I'll be back around noon." Amy had smiled that sweet smile she'd perfected since childhood, the one that had gotten her out of trouble countless times growing up. But now, watching Bella suffer in ways that defied natural explanation, that smile felt different in my memory. Calculating, satisfied, wrong. Amy had always harbored resentment toward my success with the dog training business. While I built Blair Canine Training Academy into one of the most respected training facilities in the Pacific Northwest, Amy struggled to maintain steady employment. She'd bounced between retail jobs, complained constantly about how lucky I was, and made snide comments about how I cared more about dogs than people. The jealousy had intensified over the past year as my business grew. My Instagram account, showcasing Bella's training demonstrations, had gained over 50,000 followers. Local news stations had featured us in feel-good segments about successful small businesses. I'd been invited to speak at national dog training conferences. Meanwhile, Amy had been fired from her job at a boutique for what her manager called attitude problems with customers. She'd moved back in with our parents in their cramped apartment, sleeping in her childhood bedroom at 28 years old, watching her younger sister achieve everything she felt she deserved.
But I never imagined her resentment could turn into something this dark, this evil. I'd never imagined she could hurt Bella, the innocent animal who had never done anything but bring joy and purpose to my life. As I knelt beside my convulsing dog, watching her fight for her life, pieces of a terrible puzzle began forming in my mind. Amy's unexpected visit, her insistence on being alone in my house, her strange questions last week about Bella's routine, what she ate, where she spent her time during the day. And there was something else, something I'd tried to forget from our childhood. When we were teenagers, Amy's pet hamster had died mysteriously. She'd blamed me, claiming I'd left some toxic substance within reach. Our parents had believed her completely, grounding me for a month while Amy basked in their sympathy and attention. But I'd never gone near that hamster. I'd been afraid of it, actually, too scared to even help clean its cage. Yet Amy's version of events had become family truth, and I'd carried that guilt for years. Now, watching Bella's agony, I wondered if I'd been carrying guilt for someone else's crime. "Bella, stay with me, girl," I cried, my voice breaking as I watched my beautiful golden retriever's body convulse with increasing violence. Her breathing was becoming more labored, each breath a desperate struggle that made my chest tighten with panic. This wasn't just any dog suffering on my kitchen floor. This was my everything, my business partner, my constant companion, my reason for getting up every morning with purpose and joy. Bella hadn't just been a pet since the day I'd rescued her from the Huntington County Animal Shelter 4 years ago. She'd been my salvation, my pathway out of the depression that had consumed me after my divorce from my ex-husband, Jonah. When my world had fallen apart, when I'd questioned everything about my life and my future, Bella had given me direction. I'd started Blair Canine Training Academy with nothing but Bella, a handful of basic training equipment, and a dream to help other people experience the incredible bond that comes from properly training their dogs. Bella had been my first student, my demonstration model, my proof that positive reinforcement training could transform even the most challenging behavioral issues. She'd come to me as a scared, traumatized 6-month-old puppy who'd been surrendered by her previous owners for being too energetic and destructive. But I'd seen past her fear-based behaviors to the intelligent, eager-to-please personality underneath. Within 6 months, she'd mastered basic obedience. Within a year, she was performing complex tricks and agility routines that left audiences amazed. Bella had literally built my business with her incredible performances. Every new client who walked through my doors had been won over by watching her demonstrate perfect heel positioning, flawless recall commands, and her signature trick of balancing treats on her nose until given permission to eat them. She was living proof that any dog could be trained with patience, consistency, and the right approach. Our training demonstrations had become legendary in the Portland dog community. Bella could perform a 30-minute routine without a single mistake, flowing seamlessly from basic commands to complex agility work to entertainment tricks that never failed to draw gasps and applause from audiences. She was the star of my YouTube channel, which had grown to over 100,000 subscribers who tuned in weekly to watch our training tutorials. But more than that, Bella was my emotional anchor.
When the divorce proceedings had gotten ugly, when Jonah had tried to claim half my business despite never contributing a single day to building it, Bella was there. When I'd had panic attacks in the middle of the night, afraid I'd made a terrible mistake leaving my marriage, Bella had sensed my distress and provided the deep pressure therapy that calmed my racing heart.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
She slept at the foot of my bed every night, positioning herself so she could see both the bedroom door and my face, like a furry guardian angel. She knew when I was sad before I even realized it myself, nudging my hand with her wet nose and resting her head on my lap until I couldn't help but smile. She celebrated my victories with tail-wagging enthusiasm and comforted my defeats with unwavering loyalty. The success of Blair Canine Training Academy had exceeded my wildest dreams, but it had all been built on the foundation of my relationship with Bella. We'd trained over 400 dogs together, helped countless families strengthen their bonds with their pets, and earned a reputation as one of the most effective training teams in the Pacific Northwest. Local veterinarians referred their most challenging cases to us. The Portland Dog Training Association had invited me to speak at their annual conference 3 years running. I'd been featured on the cover of Pacific Northwest Pet magazine twice, with Bella prominently displayed in both photo shoots, her golden coat gleaming and her intelligent eyes sparkling with the confidence that came from being perfectly trained and deeply loved. The financial success had been life-changing too. What had started as a desperate attempt to support myself after my divorce had grown into a 6-figure business that allowed me to buy this beautiful Victorian house in one of Portland's most desirable neighborhoods. I'd been able to pay off my student loans, build a substantial emergency fund, and even start saving for retirement at 32 years old. But Amy had watched all of the success with growing resentment and bitterness. Every social media post celebrating a training milestone, every news article featuring Bella and me, every family dinner where our parents asked about my business, it all seemed to fuel her anger rather than inspire her to pursue her own dreams.
"You act like that dog is more important than your own family," Amy had said just last month at our parents' Thanksgiving dinner. "It's not normal, Marie. People who obsess over animals usually have something wrong with them psychologically." The comment had stung because it revealed how little Amy understood about what Bella meant to me, about how our partnership had literally saved my life and career. But I'd brushed it off as typical sibling jealousy, never imagining it could escalate into something as monstrous as this. Now, watching Bella's breathing become more and more labored, I realized I'd been dangerously naive about my sister's capacity for cruelty. The successful business, the beautiful house, the financial security, the recognition and respect I'd earned in my field, none of it mattered if Bella didn't survive whatever Amy had done to her. I scooped Bella up in my arms, feeling her 70-pound body trembling against my chest like she was freezing from the inside out. Her normally warm, soft coat was damp with sweat, and I could feel her heart racing frantically beneath my hands. Her beautiful brown eyes, usually so alert and focused on my face, were now glazed and unfocused, rolling back in ways that terrified me. "We're going to the emergency vet right now," I whispered into her ear, hoping she could still hear me through whatever poison was coursing through her system. "You're going to be okay, Bella. You have to be okay. I can't lose you. Not like this." My sister Amy stood in my living room doorway, leaning casually against the frame with her arms crossed, watching Bella's suffering with an expression that would haunt me for the rest of my life. There was no shock, no concern, no natural human reaction to witnessing an animal in obvious distress. Instead, her face held something that looked disturbingly close to satisfaction, like she was watching the finale of a movie she'd been anticipating for months. "Oh no, what happened to Bella?" Amy asked, but her tone was completely wrong. The words were right, but they came out flat, rehearsed, like she was reading lines from a script she'd practiced. There was no genuine alarm in her voice, no rush to help, no immediate questions about what we should do or whether we needed to call a veterinarian. She pulled out her phone, not to call for emergency help as any normal person would, but to check her text messages.
Her fingers moved across the screen with casual indifference while my dog writhed in agony just 15 feet away from her. Maybe she just ate something weird, Amy suggested with a shrug, her eyes still focused on her phone screen. Dogs are always getting into garbage or eating things they shouldn't. You know how they are. They'll eat anything that smells interesting. But that explanation made no sense, and Amy knew it. She'd been around Bella hundreds of times over the past 4 years. She knew how well trained Bella was, how she'd never eat anything without permission, how I'd trained her specifically to ignore food that wasn't given to her directly from my hands. "Amy, look at her!" I screamed, my voice cracking with desperation. "This isn't normal. Something is seriously wrong. She's having seizures." Amy finally glanced away from her phone, but her reaction was all wrong. Instead of the horror and concern that any animal lover would show, she seemed almost annoyed that I was making such a big deal about the situation. "You always were dramatic about that dog," she said, rolling her eyes in a gesture I remembered from our childhood whenever she was caught doing something wrong. "Remember when she had that ear infection last year and you acted like she was dying? Dogs get sick sometimes, Marie. It's not the end of the world." The comparison was insulting and completely inaccurate. Bella's ear infection had been a minor issue that I'd handled calmly and professionally, taking her to the vet for a routine examination and treatment. This was clearly an emergency situation that required immediate intervention, and any person with basic empathy would recognize the difference. But what disturbed me most was Amy's body language. She remained standing in the doorway, making no move to come closer or offer help. Her posture was relaxed, almost casual, like she was watching a mildly interesting television show rather than witnessing a beloved family pet fighting for her life. "Shouldn't we call Dr. Stone's emergency line?" I asked, referring to Bella's regular veterinarian. "Or take her to the after-hours clinic?" "I guess," Amy replied with another shrug, "if you think it's really that serious. But you know how expensive emergency vet visits are. Maybe she'll just sleep it off." Sleep it off? I stared at my sister in disbelief. Bella was having violent seizures, foaming at the mouth, and clearly in extreme distress. And Amy was suggesting she might just need a nap? The suggestion was so inappropriate, so callous, that it felt like a slap across my face. Amy had been around animals her entire life. We'd grown up with family pets, and she'd seen me work with hundreds of dogs over the past 5 years. She knew what normal canine illness looked like versus what constituted a genuine emergency. Her casual dismissal of Bella's obvious crisis wasn't ignorance. It was something much darker. I noticed Amy checking the time on her phone repeatedly, like she was waiting for something or monitoring a timeline. Her behavior felt calculated, controlled, like she was following some internal schedule that I wasn't privy to. "How long has she been like this?" Amy asked, and again, the question felt rehearsed rather than genuine. "I found her like this maybe 10 minutes ago," I replied, stroking Bella's trembling head, "right after I finished my phone call with the Huntington Dog Training Center about next week's seminar."
Amy nodded slowly, like she was filing this information away for some future reference. And she was fine before that? Nothing seemed off about her behavior this morning? The questions felt like an interrogation rather than concern from a loving sister. Amy was gathering information, but not in the way someone would if they were trying to help diagnose Bella's condition. She seemed more interested in establishing a timeline than in Bella's welfare. "She was perfect this morning," I said, my voice breaking as I remembered how Bella had performed her usual morning routine flawlessly just a few hours earlier. She ate her breakfast normally, did her morning training exercises, played fetch in the backyard. Everything was completely normal until now. Amy made a small humming sound, like she was confirming something she already knew. The sound sent chills down my spine because it suggested she wasn't surprised by this information. She was expecting it. "Well, I should probably get going," Amy said, straightening up from the doorway. "I need to return Mom's car before she gets home from work. Let me know how things go with the vet." The casual way she announced her departure while my dog was fighting for her life felt like another slap.
Any normal person would offer to help, to drive us to the emergency clinic, to stay and provide moral support during a crisis. Amy was treating this like a minor inconvenience that she couldn't be bothered to deal with. As she turned to leave, I caught something in her expression, a fleeting moment where her carefully controlled mask slipped, revealing what looked like anticipation underneath. Like she was eager to see how this situation would unfold, like she was looking forward to the aftermath of whatever was happening to Bella. I knew with absolute certainty that this wasn't normal, wasn't natural, wasn't anything that should be happening to a healthy 4-year-old golden retriever who had been perfectly fine just hours earlier. I gathered Bella into my arms, feeling her 70 pounds of trembling muscle and bone against my chest, her body still convulsing in waves that seemed to be getting stronger rather than weaker. The drive to Northwest Emergency Veterinary Hospital felt like the longest 15 minutes of my life. I'd made this trip dozens of times over the years with client dogs who'd had various emergencies, but never with Bella, and never under circumstances this terrifying. I kept one hand on the steering wheel of my Honda CR-V and one hand on Bella's chest, feeling her rapid, irregular heartbeat beneath my palm. "Stay with me, girl," I whispered over and over during the drive, my voice shaking with barely controlled panic. "Remember our first agility competition? Remember how nervous I was, and you just looked at me like, 'I've got this, Mom. You've got this now, too. You're the strongest dog I know.'" But even as I spoke the encouraging words, I could see Bella's condition deteriorating. Her breathing was becoming more labored, more desperate. The foam around her mouth had increased, and her beautiful golden coat was soaked with sweat, despite the cool November weather. Her normally bright, intelligent eyes were glassy and unfocused, staring at nothing. Dr. Amanda Stone, the head veterinarian at Northwest Emergency, took one look at Bella and immediately called for her entire emergency team. Within seconds of our arrival, Bella was on a gurney, surrounded by technicians establishing IV lines, drawing blood samples, and attaching monitoring equipment to track her vital signs. "Marie, I need you to tell me everything," Dr. Stone said, her hands working efficiently to examine Bella while she spoke. "What has she eaten in the last 24 hours? Any changes in her routine? Any access to chemicals, medications, anything that might be toxic?" I ran through Bella's routine with the precision of the professional dog trainer I was. Same premium kibble she'd eaten for 3 years, measured to the exact cup. Same filtered water from the same stainless steel bowl. Same morning training session in the backyard. Same toys, same treats. Nothing had changed. But one crucial detail. "My sister Amy was alone in my house for about 4 hours this morning," I said. "She said she needed to borrow my laptop charger. I gave her my spare key and left for my training appointments at the Huntington Community Center." Dr. Stone paused in her examination, her experienced eyes meeting mine. "How long has it been since you returned home and found Bella like this?" "Maybe 30 minutes. I found her collapsed in the kitchen around noon, and Amy was still there when I discovered her." "These symptoms," Dr. Stone said grimly, showing me the preliminary readings from Bella's blood work, "are consistent with poisoning. The rapid onset, the severity of the neurological symptoms, the excessive salivation, this wasn't caused by eating something accidentally." The word poisoning hit me like a physical blow to the chest. I'd suspected it from the moment I found Bella, but hearing it confirmed by a veterinary professional made it real in a way that was almost unbearable. "What kind of poison?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "We won't know for certain until the full toxicology panel comes back, but based on the symptom presentation, I suspect antifreeze poisoning. Ethylene glycol has a sweet taste that dogs find appealing, and it causes exactly this type of rapid neurological deterioration." Antifreeze. The revelation made my stomach lurch because I knew with absolute certainty that there was no antifreeze anywhere in my house. I didn't even own a car that would require antifreeze. My Honda was only 2 years old and serviced exclusively at the dealership. I kept no automotive chemicals in my garage, no antifreeze in my utility room, nothing that could explain accidental exposure.
"Dr. Stone, I need you to understand something," I said, my voice steadying as my professional training kicked in. I don't have antifreeze in my house. Bella has never been exposed to automotive chemicals. If she was poisoned with antifreeze, someone gave it to her deliberately. Dr. Stone nodded gravely. That's what I was afraid you were going to say. Maria, I'm going to be very direct with you. If this is deliberate antifreeze poisoning, the next few hours are critical. We need to start treatment immediately, and we need to contact the authorities. The veterinary team moved with impressive efficiency, starting Bella on IV fluids to help flush the toxins from her system and administering medications to control her seizures. They drew multiple vials of blood for comprehensive testing and began the delicate process of trying to counteract whatever poison was attacking her system. But it was Dr. Stone's next revelation that changed everything about how I understood this situation. Marie, there's something else you should know, she said, pulling me aside to her office while the technicians worked on Bella. I've been practicing emergency veterinary medicine for 15 years, and I've seen a lot of deliberate poisoning cases. They're usually revenge attacks, domestic disputes, or situations involving someone who wants to cause maximum emotional damage to the pet owner. She pulled up Bella's medical records on her computer, showing me her complete health history. Bella is obviously more than just a pet to you. She's your business partner, your source of income, your public face. Someone who wanted to destroy your life would know that hurting Bella would be the most effective way to do it. The clinical way Dr. Stone explained the motivation behind Bella's poisoning made me feel sick, but it also crystallized something I'd been trying not to acknowledge. This wasn't a random act of cruelty. This was a calculated attack designed to destroy everything I'd built, everything that mattered to me. And Amy had been alone in my house for 4 hours with unlimited access to Bella. Dr. Stone returned from the laboratory with test results that confirmed my worst fears, her face grave with the kind of professional seriousness that veterinarians reserve for the most dire situations. She sat down across from me in her office, Bella's blood work spread across her desk like evidence in a criminal investigation. Marie, the preliminary toxicology results show extremely high levels of ethylene glycol in Bella's bloodstream, she said, pointing to specific numbers on the lab report. This is definitely antifreeze poisoning, and the concentration levels indicate she consumed a significant amount. I stared at the clinical data, the cold numbers that represented my dog's fight for survival. How much are we talking about? Based on these blood levels and Bella's body weight, I estimate she ingested approximately 4 to 6 ounces of antifreeze. For a 70-pound dog, that's enough to be potentially fatal if we hadn't caught it this early. The precision of the amount hit me like another blow. This wasn't accidental exposure or a dog getting into a small puddle of spilled automotive fluid. Someone had deliberately given Bella a substantial quantity of poison, enough to ensure it would cause maximum damage. The timing is also significant, Dr. Stone continued, showing me a timeline she'd constructed based on Bella's symptoms and blood chemistry. The antifreeze was administered approximately 3 to 4 hours ago, which places it right in the middle of the time frame when your sister was alone in your house. I felt sick thinking about Amy calmly feeding poison to Bella while I was across town conducting training sessions, completely unaware that my dog was being murdered in my own kitchen. The betrayal felt more devastating than the actual poisoning because it came from someone who was supposed to love and protect both of us. There's something else that's concerning, Dr. Stone said, pulling up additional test results. We also found traces of a sedative in Bella's system. Someone gave her something to make her drowsy before administering the antifreeze. The revelation added another layer of premeditation to the crime. Amy hadn't just impulsively decided to poison Bella. She'd planned this attack carefully, ensuring that Bella would be calm and compliant while consuming the deadly substance. What kind of sedative? I asked, though I dreaded learning more details about how systematically Amy had planned this assault. Diphenhydramine, basic Benadryl. It's commonly used to sedate dogs before veterinary procedures, and it would explain why Bella didn't struggle or show signs of distress until the antifreeze began affecting her neurological system. I remembered Amy asking detailed questions about Bella's routine during our last family dinner, specifically about what treats she liked best and whether she was food motivated.
At the time, I thought Amy was finally showing interest in my work and my relationship with Bella. Now I realized she'd been gathering intelligence for this attack. The sedative would have made Bella drowsy and cooperative, Dr. Stone explained. She probably felt relaxed and happy when your sister offered her whatever delivery method was used for the antifreeze. She wouldn't have resisted or shown fear. The image of Bella trustingly accepting poison from Amy, thinking she was getting a special treat from her owner's sister, made me want to vomit. Bella had always been friendly toward Amy, greeting her with tail wags and affection whenever she visited. The idea that Amy had exploited Bella's trusting nature to murder her felt like the deepest possible betrayal. Can we prove this was deliberate? I asked, needing to know whether we had enough evidence to hold Amy accountable for what she'd done.
Dr. Stone nodded firmly. The combination of sedative and antifreeze, the precise dosing, the timing, this is clearly intentional poisoning. I'm legally required to report suspected cases of animal cruelty to law enforcement, and this case definitely qualifies. She reached for her phone to make the call that would officially transform this from a veterinary emergency into a criminal investigation. Marie, I need you to understand that we're not just talking about animal cruelty charges here. Given the premeditation involved and the value of Bella as a trained working dog, this could be prosecuted as felony destruction of property as well. The legal terminology felt strange when applied to Bella, who was so much more than property to me. But I understood that the law needed concrete categories to prosecute crimes, and if those categories could help ensure Amy faced serious consequences for what she'd done, I was grateful for them. What are Bella's chances? I asked, the question I'd been afraid to voice since arriving at the emergency clinic. Dr. Stone's expression softened with compassion. We caught it early because you brought her in so quickly. We've started aggressive treatment to counteract the antifreeze and protect her kidneys. The next 12 to 24 hours will be critical, but I'm cautiously optimistic. For the first time since finding Bella collapsed in my kitchen, I felt a small spark of hope that we might be able to save her life and bring Amy to justice for this horrific crime. My phone buzzed with incoming text messages while Bella fought for her life in the emergency veterinary hospital, each notification feeling like another knife twist in an already devastating situation. The first message was from my mother, and reading it made me feel like I was drowning in disbelief and family dysfunction. Amy told us about Bella getting sick. Dogs eat strange things sometimes, honey. Don't overreact like you always do with that animal. Remember when your goldfish died when you were kids? These things just happen naturally. The casual dismissal of Bella's critical condition felt like a slap across my face. My mother was treating attempted murder as if it were a minor pet health issue that I was blowing out of proportion. The suggestion that I was overreacting to my dog being deliberately poisoned revealed how little my family understood about what Bella meant to me and how serious this situation actually was. But it was the mention of my childhood goldfish that sent ice water through my veins. When I was 14 years old, my pet goldfish Neptune had died mysteriously overnight. I'd found him floating in his tank the next morning, and Amy had immediately started crying, claiming she'd seen me putting something white in his water the night before. Our parents had believed Amy's story completely, grounding me for 2 weeks for irresponsible pet care and making me write a letter of apology to the family for killing Neptune through neglect. I'd protested my innocence, but Amy's tears and detailed story about seeing me near the fish tank had been more convincing than my denials. Now, sitting in this veterinary hospital while Bella received emergency treatment for antifreeze poisoning, I realized I'd been carrying guilt for Amy's crime for 18 years. She'd killed Neptune, then manipulated our parents into blaming me for it, and I'd been too young and confused to understand what had really happened. The pattern was identical. She committed the crime, then positioned herself as the sympathetic family member while portraying me as the dramatic, unstable sister who couldn't be trusted with pets. She'd perfected this manipulation technique as a teenager and was now using it again as an adult. My phone buzzed again with another message from my mother. Your father and I think you should focus on moving forward instead of dwelling on this. Amy feels terrible about Bella getting sick while she was visiting. Don't make this harder on her than it already is.
The message revealed how effectively Amy had already begun controlling the family narrative. She'd convinced our parents that Bella's poisoning was a random illness that had coincidentally occurred during her visit, and that she was the victim who needed protection from my unreasonable reaction to the situation. The speed with which Amy had contacted our parents and shaped their perception of events suggested this had all been planned in advance. She'd prepared her story before poisoning Bella, knowing she would need to manage our family's response to avoid suspicion. A third message arrived, this time from my father. "Marie, we paid for your veterinary assistant certification and helped you start your dog training business. Don't forget who supported your dreams when you want to point fingers at family members. Amy made a mistake visiting when Bella got sick, but accidents happen. Drop this before you say something you'll regret." The emotional manipulation in my father's message was breathtaking. He was simultaneously reminding me of financial debts to create guilt, minimizing Amy's attempted murder as a mistake, and threatening consequences if I pursued justice for what had been done to Bella. The suggestion that Amy had made a mistake by visiting when Bella got sick completely ignored the reality that Amy had caused Bella's condition through deliberate poisoning. But our parents had already accepted Amy's version of events and were now working to protect her from the consequences of her actions. My phone rang, and I saw Amy's number on the caller ID. Against my better judgment, I answered, needing to hear what she would say now that the severity of Bella's condition was undeniable. "Marie, I heard Bella is really sick," Amy said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I feel so bad that this happened while I was at your house. It's like I'm cursed or something. Remember how your goldfish died when I was taking care of him?"
The casual way Amy referenced Neptune's death while pretending to feel guilty about Bella's poisoning confirmed everything I now understood about my sister's psychology. She was actually enjoying the opportunity to remind me of her previous successful pet murder while maintaining plausible deniability about both crimes. "The vet says it's antifreeze poisoning," I said, watching carefully for Amy's reaction. "Oh no, that's terrible," Amy replied, but I could hear something that sounded almost like satisfaction in her voice. "I hope they can save her. But you know, Marie, sometimes these things are just meant to happen. Maybe it's time to think about whether keeping such an expensive animal is really worth all this stress and heartbreak." The suggestion that I should consider giving up on Bella while she fought for her life revealed the true purpose behind Amy's attack. She hadn't just wanted to hurt my dog, she'd wanted to destroy my entire life's work and force me to abandon everything I'd built. Dr. Stone returned from consulting with the toxicology lab, carrying a comprehensive report that would forever change how I understood what had happened to Bella. Her expression was grim as she sat down across from me in the small consultation room, the detailed test results spread between us like evidence in a murder trial. "Marie, the complete blood analysis confirms our worst fears," she began, pointing to specific data points on the laboratory printout. "Bella was given a lethal dose of automotive antifreeze mixed with approximately 20 milligrams of diphenhydramine. This wasn't accidental exposure. This was a calculated attempt to kill your dog." The clinical precision of the poisoning attempt made my stomach turn. Amy hadn't acted in a moment of rage or jealousy. She'd researched the exact dosages needed to ensure Bella would suffer and die, then executed her plan with the cold efficiency of a professional assassin. "The timing of the drug administration tells us a lot about how this was carried out," Dr. Stone continued, showing me a timeline she'd constructed based on Bella's blood chemistry. "The sedative was given first, approximately 30 minutes before the antifreeze. This suggests your sister wanted Bella to be calm and cooperative when she administered the poison." I thought about Bella's trusting nature, how she'd always been excited to meet new people and accept treats from visitors. Annie had exploited that innocent friendliness to murder her, probably offering what Bella thought was a special snack before delivering the fatal dose of poison. "There's something else that's particularly disturbing," Dr. Stone said, pulling up additional test results. "The antifreeze was mixed with something sweet. We found traces of peanut butter and honey in Bella's stomach contents. Someone went to considerable effort to make the poison appealing and mask its taste."
The revelation that Amy had used peanut butter, Bella's favorite treat, as a delivery method for the poison felt like another devastating betrayal. She'd turned something that brought Bella joy into an instrument of torture and death, corrupting even the simple pleasure of a beloved snack. "How did you know to test for these specific substances?" I asked, impressed by the thoroughness of the veterinary team's investigation. "Cases of deliberate pet poisoning follow predictable patterns," Dr. Stone explained. "The perpetrators usually use substances that are easily accessible, and they often try to mask the taste with foods the animal enjoys. Antifreeze mixed with peanut butter is unfortunately common in intentional poisoning cases." She pulled up another section of the lab report, showing me chemical analysis data that looked like something from a forensic investigation. The concentration levels also tell us that whoever did this had researched the appropriate dosage for a dog of Bella's size. This wasn't guesswork, this was planned. The methodical nature of Amy's attack made it even more horrifying. She hadn't acted impulsively or in a moment of emotional breakdown. She'd spent time researching how to kill Bella most effectively, gathering the necessary materials, and planning the perfect opportunity to carry out her crime. "Can this evidence be used in a criminal prosecution?" I asked, needing to know whether we had enough proof to hold Amy accountable for what she'd done. Dr. Stone nodded firmly. "Absolutely. The blood work, the timeline, the specific combination of substances, it all points to deliberate poisoning. I'm required by law to report suspected animal cruelty cases, and I've already contacted the Huntington County Sheriff's Department." She reached for her phone to show me the report she'd filed with law enforcement. "Detective Colby Martinez will be here within the hour to take your statement and collect evidence. This case will likely be prosecuted as felony animal cruelty, and possibly as destruction of property, given Bella's value as a trained working dog." The legal terminology felt strange when applied to Bella, but I understood that the law needed concrete categories to prosecute crimes effectively. If treating Bella as valuable property would result in more serious charges against Amy, I was grateful for any legal framework that could deliver justice. "What happens next with Bella's treatment?" I asked, the question that mattered most to me, despite the importance of the criminal investigation. "We're continuing aggressive supportive care to protect her kidneys and neurological system," Dr. Stone explained, showing me Bella's current vital signs on the monitoring equipment. "The next 12 hours are critical. If we can prevent permanent kidney damage, she has a good chance of making a full recovery." For the first time since discovering Bella collapsed in my kitchen, I felt genuine hope that she might survive Amy's attempt to murder her. But I also felt a burning determination to ensure that Amy faced the full consequences of her calculated cruelty. The evidence was overwhelming, the crime was documented, and law enforcement was now involved. Amy's pattern of pet murders was finally going to be exposed, and she would no longer be able to hide behind family protection and manipulation. This time, the truth would set us free. Detective Colby Martinez arrived at the veterinary hospital within 45 minutes of Dr. Stone's call, bringing with him a level of technological investigation that I hadn't expected for an animal cruelty case. He was a tall, serious man in his late 30s who treated Bella's poisoning with the same gravity he would bring to any attempted murder investigation. "Miss Blair, I need you to understand that deliberate pet poisoning cases often involve sophisticated planning and evidence trails," Detective Martinez explained as he set up his laptop in Dr. Stone's office. "Modern technology gives us tools to uncover the truth that weren't available even 5 years ago." He pulled up a specialized software program that could analyze digital evidence related to animal cruelty cases. "First, I need to examine your sister's recent online activity. People who plan pet poisonings usually research methods and dosages beforehand, and they often leave digital footprints." Detective Martinez explained that he'd already obtained a preliminary warrant to examine Amy's internet search history, social media activity, and recent purchases. What he'd discovered in just the past hour had alarmed him enough to expedite the investigation. "Your sister has been researching antifreeze poisoning in dogs for the past 3 weeks," he said, showing me screenshots of Amy's search history. She looked up specific dosages, symptoms to expect, timeline of effects, and even searched for information about how veterinarians test for antifreeze poisoning. The evidence was damning and revealed the extent of Amy's premeditation. She hadn't decided to poison Bella impulsively during her visit to my house. She'd been planning this attack for weeks, researching every detail to ensure it would be effective and potentially undetectable. There's more, Detective Martinez continued, pulling up additional search results. She also researched your daily schedule, looked up information about your training appointments, and even searched for details about your house's security system and whether you had cameras. The revelation that Amy had been stalking my routine and planning around my schedule made me feel violated in ways I hadn't expected. She'd been studying my life like a predator studies prey, looking for the perfect opportunity to strike when she could be alone with Bella for an extended period. But here's where technology really works in our favor, Detective Martinez said, opening a new application on his laptop. Your house is equipped with a modern smart home system that logs more data than most people realize. I'd installed the smart home system primarily for security and energy efficiency, but I hadn't considered how much information it might be recording about daily activities inside my house. Detective Martinez explained that these systems often capture detailed data about door openings, motion detection, and even appliance usage. Your smart doorbell recorded Amy arriving at 8:47 a.m. and leaving at 12:23 p.m., but more importantly, your smart kitchen appliances logged activity that tells us exactly what she was doing while you were gone. The technological evidence painted a disturbing picture of Amy's activities during her 4 hours alone in my house. The smart refrigerator had logged the door being opened multiple times, the smart faucet had recorded unusual water usage patterns, and even the smart garbage disposal had been activated at times that didn't match my normal routine. Most interesting is this data from your smart pet feeder, Detective Martinez said, pointing to specific timestamps. It shows someone manually overriding the automatic feeding schedule and dispensing food at 10:15, about an hour and a half after you left for your training appointments. The smart pet feeder data correlated perfectly with the timeline Dr. Stone had established for when Bella consumed the sedative and antifreeze. Amy had used my own technology to deliver the poison, probably mixing it with Bella's regular food to ensure she would consume the entire deadly dose. Your sister also made a crucial mistake with her phone, Detective Martinez continued, showing me location data that had been automatically recorded by Amy's smartphone. Her GPS shows her stopping at an automotive supply store on her way to your house, where store cameras captured her purchasing antifreeze and disposable gloves. The purchase receipt and security footage from the automotive store provided undeniable proof that Amy had obtained the poison immediately before coming to my house. There was no possible innocent explanation for buying antifreeze on the same day she'd volunteered to spend time alone with my dog. We also found something interesting in your home's smart trash system, Detective Martinez said, pulling up data I didn't even know was being collected. The smart bin logged an unusual weight increase at 11:45 p.m., suggesting someone disposed of evidence while you were away. The technological evidence was overwhelming and painted a complete picture of Amy's calculated crime. Every device in my smart home had been silently recording her movements and activities, creating a digital trail that would be impossible for her to deny or explain away.
This level of evidence makes prosecution straightforward, Detective Martinez assured me. Your sister planned this attack meticulously, but she underestimated how much modern technology would document her crimes. Detective Martinez made a phone call that would provide the final pieces of evidence needed to build an ironclad case against Amy. Within 2 hours, he'd obtained warrants for security footage from multiple locations along Amy's route to my house, creating a comprehensive timeline of her movements on the day she poisoned Bella. Ms. Blair, what we've discovered goes far beyond what I initially expected for a pet poisoning case, Detective Martinez said, returning to Dr. Stone's office with his laptop loaded with video evidence. Your sister's actions show a level of premeditation that transforms this from simple animal cruelty into something much more serious. The first video came from the parking lot of AutoZone, where Amy had stopped at 8:15 a.m. before coming to my house.
The high-definition security cameras clearly showed her purchasing a bottle of antifreeze, a package of disposable gloves, and a small funnel, everything needed to carry out her planned attack on Bella. Notice her demeanor in this footage, Detective Martinez pointed out, pausing the video on a clear shot of Amy's face. She's calm, focused, methodical. This isn't someone acting impulsively or emotionally. She's executing a plan she's thought through carefully. The timestamp on the automotive store footage confirmed that Amy had acquired the poison just 32 minutes before arriving at my house, proving that she'd come to visit me with the specific intention of harming Bella. There was no innocent explanation for those purchases on that particular morning. But the really damning evidence comes from your neighborhood, Detective Martinez continued, pulling up footage from 3 different residential security systems along my street. Your neighbor's Ring doorbells and security cameras captured Amy's entire visit from multiple angles. The neighborhood footage revealed details that chilled me to the bone. Amy's car was recorded arriving at my house at 8:47 a.m., but the cameras also showed her driving slowly past my house twice earlier that morning, apparently surveillance runs, to ensure I wasn't home and to check for any signs of unexpected activity. At 7:23 a.m. and 7:41 a.m., she drove past your house without stopping, Detective Martinez explained, showing me the earlier footage. She was making sure your routine was normal, that you'd left for your training appointments as scheduled, and that she'd have the house to herself. The level of surveillance Amy had conducted before executing her plan made the crime even more disturbing. She hadn't just decided to hurt Bella during a casual visit, she'd been watching my house, studying my patterns, and waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. Your next-door neighbor's security system captured something particularly interesting, Detective Martinez said, switching to footage from a different angle. At 10:47 a.m., their camera shows Amy in your backyard, disposing of something in your garbage bins. The neighbor's camera had recorded Amy throwing away the empty antifreeze container, the disposable gloves, and what appeared to be the small funnel she'd used to mix the poison with Bella's food. She'd been careful to dispose of the evidence outside, probably thinking it would be collected with the regular trash pickup before anyone discovered Bella's condition. But she made a critical error, Detective Martinez continued, pulling up additional footage. Your own home security system captured her re-entering your house after disposing of the evidence, and the indoor cameras show her washing her hands thoroughly at your kitchen sink. The indoor security footage revealed Amy's consciousness of guilt in devastating detail. She'd spent nearly 10 minutes scrubbing her hands and cleaning the kitchen counter, clearly trying to remove any traces of antifreeze or other evidence that might link her to Bella's poisoning. The most disturbing footage comes from your living room camera, Detective Martinez said, his voice growing more serious. It shows Amy sitting on your couch for nearly 30 minutes after administering the poison, just waiting and watching for Bella to show symptoms. The video of Amy calmly sitting in my living room while Bella began showing signs of distress was the most horrifying evidence yet. She hadn't left immediately after poisoning my dog. She'd stayed to watch the effects of her crime, like a sadistic scientist observing the results of an experiment. At 11:18 a.m., your camera captured Bella beginning to show signs of neurological distress, Detective Martinez explained, though he spared me from having to watch that particular footage. Amy's reaction is telling. She shows no concern, no attempt to help, just clinical observation. The security footage painted a complete picture of a calculated crime carried out by someone who took pleasure in causing suffering. Amy hadn't just wanted to hurt me by killing Bella, she'd wanted to witness the destruction she was causing. This evidence is more than sufficient for prosecution, Detective Martinez assured me. Between the purchase records, the surveillance footage, the digital evidence, and the veterinary testimony, we have an overwhelming case against your sister. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt confident that justice would be served and Amy would face serious consequences for her calculated cruelty. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Detective Martinez received a phone call that would elevate this case far beyond local animal cruelty charges. As he spoke quietly with someone on the other end, I could see his expression growing more serious, more concerned about implications I didn't yet understand. Miss Blair, I need to ask you something important. Detective Martinez said after ending his call. Do you have any family members who work in federal law enforcement? The question caught me off guard, but I nodded slowly. My brother Cole works for the FBI. He's a special agent based out of the Portland field office. Why? Detective Martinez's expression shifted to something approaching relief mixed with professional concern. I just spoke with my supervisor about this case, and given the level of premeditation involved and some other factors, he's recommended we contact federal authorities. Your brother's involvement could actually be very beneficial for building a stronger case. Within an hour, Special Agent Cole Blair arrived at the veterinary hospital, bringing with him a level of federal investigative resources that transformed everything about how this case would be handled. Cole was 35 years old, 6 years older than me, and had been with the FBI for over a decade, specializing in domestic terrorism and threats against federal employees and their families. Marie, I'm here as both your brother and as a federal agent, Cole said, embracing me carefully in the hospital waiting room. What Amy did to Bella isn't just animal cruelty, it's an attack on a family member of a federal law enforcement officer, which makes this a federal matter. Cole explained that the FBI took threats and attacks against the families of federal agents very seriously, even when those attacks were carried out by other family members. The deliberate poisoning of my dog could be prosecuted under federal statutes related to intimidation and domestic terrorism. The level of planning Amy put into this attack suggests she was trying to cause you maximum psychological damage, Cole continued, reviewing the evidence Detective Martinez had collected. When someone targets a federal agent's family member with this degree of premeditation, it raises questions about whether this was meant to compromise your emotional stability or my professional effectiveness. The federal perspective on Amy's crime revealed dimensions I hadn't considered. As the sister of an FBI agent, any attack against me or my property could potentially be motivated by someone wanting to influence or intimidate Cole's work. Even though Amy was family, her calculated assault on something she knew was central to my emotional well-being fell under federal jurisdiction. There's another factor that makes this a federal case, Cole said, pulling up information on his secure laptop. Amy's internet research included searches about your connection to me and my work with the FBI. She specifically looked up information about federal agents' families and whether attacks against them carried enhanced penalties. The revelation that Amy had researched the federal implications of her crime before carrying it out showed an even deeper level of malicious calculation. She'd known that poisoning Bella could potentially be prosecuted of the federal crime, but she'd decided to proceed anyway, suggesting her hatred for me was strong enough to risk serious federal charges. We've also discovered something else troubling, Cole continued, showing me search results from Amy's computer that the FBI's cybercrimes unit had analyzed. She's been researching other federal agents in the Portland area, looking up information about their families, their pets, their daily routines. The expanded scope of Amy's research suggested that her attack on Bella might not have been an isolated incident of sibling jealousy. She appeared to have been developing a pattern of targeting federal agents' families, using pets as a way to cause maximum emotional damage while potentially flying under the radar of traditional security measures. The FBI has encountered similar cases in other states, Cole explained, pulling up a classified database of attacks against federal employees' families. There's been an increasing trend of domestic terrorists targeting law enforcement families through their pets, knowing that most security protocols focus on direct threats against the agents themselves. The federal investigation revealed that Amy's crime was part of a larger pattern of domestic terrorism that I hadn't even known existed. People were systematically targeting the families of federal agents, using beloved pets as weapons to cause psychological trauma and potentially compromise the agent's professional effectiveness. This changes everything about how Amy will be prosecuted, Cole said, his voice taking on the cold professionalism I'd heard him use when discussing serious criminal cases. Instead of state animal cruelty charges, she'll be facing federal charges related to domestic terrorism, intimidation of a federal officer's family, and conspiracy to interfere with federal law enforcement operations. The enhanced federal charges carried sentences of 10 to 20 years in federal prison, far more serious than the local animal cruelty charges Amy had probably expected when she planned her attack on Bella. The FBI investigation into Amy's attack on Bella uncovered a disturbing network of similar crimes that extended far beyond what anyone had initially suspected. Cole returned from a secure briefing with his supervisors, carrying classified files that revealed the true scope of what we were dealing with. "Marie, what Amy did to Bella isn't an isolated incident," Cole said, spreading federal case files across Dr. Stone's conference table. "The FBI has been tracking a pattern of attacks against federal agents' families across 7 states, and Amy appears to be connected to an online community that shares tactics and targets." The revelation that Amy had been part of an organized effort to target law enforcement families made me feel sick. This wasn't just sibling jealousy or resentment about my business success. This was domestic terrorism carried out by people who wanted to destroy federal agents' lives by attacking what they loved most. "We've identified at least 15 similar cases in the past 2 years," Cole continued, showing me photographs and case summaries that painted a horrifying picture. Federal agents' family pets have been poisoned, attacked, or killed in incidents that initially appeared to be random animal cruelty, but actually followed coordinated plans. The FBI had discovered online forums where anti-government extremists shared detailed information about federal agents' personal lives, including their family members, daily routines, and beloved pets. Amy had been an active participant in these communities, sharing information about me and Bella while gathering intelligence about other potential targets. "Your social media posts about Bella made you a perfect target," Cole explained, showing me screenshots Amy had shared in extremist chat rooms. She'd been providing them with detailed information about your training schedule, Bella's routine, and your emotional attachment to your dog for months. The evidence showed that Amy had been methodically documenting my life, taking photographs of my house, recording my daily patterns, and sharing tactical information with other domestic terrorists who were planning similar attacks against federal agents' families in other states. "We've arrested 3 other family members in different states who were planning copycat attacks," Cole said, his voice grim with the weight of what they'd discovered. Amy's successful poisoning of Bella was being used as a template for future operations. The FBI's counterterrorism unit had been monitoring these online communities for months, but Amy's attack on Bella had provided them with the evidence they needed to make arrests and dismantle the network. Her crime had inadvertently exposed a nationwide conspiracy to terrorize federal law enforcement through family pets. "There's something else you need to know," Cole continued, pulling up encrypted communications the FBI had intercepted. "Amy wasn't acting alone. She's been receiving financial support and tactical guidance from an organized anti-government group based in Idaho." The domestic terrorism organization had been paying family members of federal agents to carry out attacks against their relatives' pets, knowing that these crimes would cause maximum psychological damage while appearing to be personal disputes rather than coordinated terrorism. Amy had received $5,000 for successfully poisoning Bella. "The group's strategy is particularly insidious," Cole explained, showing me their operational manual that the FBI had obtained through classified means. "They target federal agents' family pets because they know these attacks will cause severe emotional trauma without triggering the same security responses as direct threats against the agents themselves." The manual contained detailed instructions for recruiting family members who harbored resentment against their federal agent relatives, providing them with resources and support to carry out pet attacks that would appear to be family disputes rather than domestic terrorism. Amy had received $5,000 for successfully poisoning Bella. "The group's strategy is particularly insidious," Cole explained, showing me their operational manual that the FBI had obtained through classified means. "They target federal agents' family pets because they know these attacks will cause severe emotional trauma without triggering the same security responses as direct threats against the agents themselves." The manual contained detailed instructions for recruiting family members who harbored resentment against their federal agent relatives, providing them with resources and support to carry out pet attacks that would appear to be family disputes rather than domestic terrorism. Amy's been in communication with this group for over 6 months, Cole said, showing me a timeline of her involvement with the extremist organization. They specifically recruited her because of her access to your house, her knowledge of your routine, and her existing jealousy about your success. The domestic terrorists had identified Amy as a perfect asset because her personal resentment toward me made her willing to participate in their broader campaign against federal law enforcement. They'd exploited her jealousy and provided her with the resources and encouragement she needed to carry out their agenda. The good news is that Amy's attack on Bella has given us everything we need to prosecute the entire network, Cole said. Her communications with the group, the financial transfers, the tactical guidance, it's all documented evidence of a domestic terrorism conspiracy. The federal investigation had expanded from a single case of animal cruelty into a major domestic terrorism prosecution that would result in dozens of arrests across multiple states. Amy's calculated cruelty toward Bella had inadvertently exposed and destroyed an entire anti-government network. Amy will be facing federal terrorism charges, conspiracy charges, and racketeering charges in addition to the animal cruelty, Cole explained. Instead of a few years in state prison, she's looking at 25 to life in federal prison. The enhanced charges reflected the true scope of Amy's crimes and her participation in a broader conspiracy to terrorize federal law enforcement families through systematic attacks on their beloved pets. The FBI's cybercrimes unit had been working around the clock to analyze Amy's digital footprint, and what they discovered painted an even more disturbing picture of her involvement in the domestic terrorism network. Special Agent Tammy Huntington, a digital forensic specialist, arrived with encrypted files that revealed the true extent of Amy's planning and coordination. Ms. Blair, your sister's online activity shows a level of sophistication that suggests she received professional training in operational security and surveillance techniques. Agent Huntington wasn't amateur hour. She was operating like a trained intelligence asset.
The digital evidence revealed that Amy had been using encrypted messaging apps, VPN services, and anonymous email accounts to communicate with the anti-government network. She'd received detailed training materials on how to conduct surveillance, plan attacks, and avoid detection by law enforcement. For the past 4 months, Amy has been participating in virtual training sessions conducted by the Idaho-based extremist group, Agent Huntington continued, showing me screenshots of encrypted video calls. They taught her advanced surveillance techniques, chemical handling procedures, and methods for disposing of evidence. The training materials Amy had received were disturbingly professional, including detailed instructions on calculating lethal dosages of various poisons based on animal body weight, techniques for mixing toxic substances with appealing foods, and strategies for establishing alibis and avoiding suspicion. She also received $2,500 in cryptocurrency payments for conducting preliminary surveillance on your house and daily routine, Agent Huntington revealed, pulling up blockchain transaction records. The group was paying her for intelligence gathering months before she actually carried out the attack on Bella. The financial records showed that Amy's attack on Bella was the culmination of a long-term intelligence operation. She'd been systematically documenting my life, photographing my house from multiple angles, recording my daily schedule, and even mapping the locations of security cameras in my neighborhood. Your sister's phone contained over 300 photographs of your house, your yard, and Bella taken over a 6-month period, Agent Huntington said, showing me a disturbing collection of surveillance images. She'd been documenting everything from your mail delivery times to when you took Bella for walks. The surveillance photographs revealed that Amy had been stalking my life with the dedication of a professional operative. She documented which windows had the best sightlines into my house, when my neighbors were typically home, and even the schedules of local police patrols in my neighborhood. But the most damaging evidence comes from her communications with other network members, Agent Huntington continued, pulling up encrypted chat logs. She's been bragging about having access to a federal agent's sister and discussing plans for future attacks.
The chat logs showed Amy discussing potential ways to escalate beyond pet attacks, including suggestions for targeting federal agents' children, elderly parents, or romantic partners. Her successful poisoning of Bella had earned her status within the extremist community and led to discussions about more ambitious operations. She also shared detailed information about your brother Cole's work schedule, his vehicle, and his daily routines, Agent Huntington revealed, showing the intelligence reports Amy had compiled about Cole's professional activities. The group was using her access to gather information for potential future attacks against a federal agent. The revelation that Amy had been spying on Cole and sharing intelligence about his FBI activities with domestic terrorists added another layer of betrayal to her crimes. She hadn't just attacked me, she'd been actively working to compromise national security by providing operational intelligence to anti-government extremists. The network's ultimate goal was to use family-based attacks to force federal agents to quit their jobs or transfer to less sensitive positions, Agent Huntington explained, showing me strategic planning documents the FBI had intercepted. The domestic terrorism strategy was particularly insidious because it exploited the natural protective instincts of federal agents. By attacking family members and pets, the extremists hoped to create situations where agents would prioritize their family safety over their professional duties. Amy's attack on Bella was intended to be the first in a series of escalating attacks against your family, Agent Huntington continued, revealing plans that chilled me to the bone. The group had identified you as a high-value target because of your emotional attachment to your dog and your close relationship with Cole. The network's planning documents showed that they'd intended to follow Bella's poisoning with attacks on my business, my house, and potentially my physical safety if the initial pet attack didn't achieve their desired result of forcing Cole to resign from the FBI. Fortunately, Amy's capture has allowed us to roll up the entire network before they could execute any additional attacks, Agent Huntington said, showing me arrest records from coordinated raids across 7 states. Her communications provided us with the intelligence we needed to identify and arrest 43 members of this domestic terrorism cell. The federal investigation had transformed Amy's crime from an isolated act of cruelty into the key that unlocked and destroyed an entire domestic terrorism network. The federal investigation into Amy's domestic terrorism activities created a massive rift in my family that made the original pet poisoning seem almost simple by comparison. Within hours of the FBI raids and arrests, my parents arrived at the veterinary hospital in a state of panic and denial that bordered on hysteria. "Marie, you have to make this stop," my mother pleaded, tears streaming down her face as she confronted me in the hospital waiting room. "The FBI arrested Amy this morning. They're calling her a terrorist. This has gone too far. You have to tell them this was just a family dispute over a sick dog."
The desperation in my mother's voice revealed how completely she'd failed to understand the gravity of what Amy had done. She was still treating this as a minor family disagreement that had somehow gotten blown out of proportion, rather than a calculated act of domestic terrorism that had endangered national security. "Mom, Amy poisoned Bella as part of a conspiracy to terrorize federal agents' families," I explained, trying to help her understand the reality of the situation. "This isn't about a sick dog. This is about Amy working with anti-government extremists to attack Cole and me." But my mother's response showed how deep her denial ran. "Amy would never do anything to hurt Cole. She loves her brother. This is all some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe she gave Bella something by accident, but she's not a terrorist." My father's approach was more aggressive and revealing about his priorities. "Marie, do you have any idea what this is going to do to our family's reputation? Your mother's job at the school district is in jeopardy. Our neighbors are treating us like criminals. You need to find a way to make this go away." The suggestion that I should somehow make federal terrorism charges go away to protect the family's reputation showed how twisted his thinking had become. He was more concerned about social embarrassment than the fact that his daughter had participated in a domestic terrorism network. "Amy was receiving money from extremists to spy on Cole and attack me," I said, showing them evidence that Agent Huntington had cleared for family disclosure. "She's been documenting our lives for months and sharing intelligence with people who want to hurt federal agents." My father's response was to dismiss the evidence entirely. That's probably all made up by the FBI to make their case look stronger. You know how the government exaggerates these things. Amy probably just looked up some information online out of curiosity. The willful blindness my parents showed toward overwhelming evidence of Amy's crimes was almost as disturbing as the crimes themselves. They were so invested in protecting their image of Amy as their troubled but innocent daughter that they couldn't accept the reality of what she'd become. "We've talked to a lawyer," my mother continued, her voice taking on a manipulative tone I remembered from childhood. "He says if you refuse to cooperate with the prosecution, they won't have enough evidence to convict Amy of the serious charges. You could save your sister's life." The suggestion that I should obstruct justice to help Amy escape consequences for domestic terrorism revealed how completely my parents had lost their moral compass. They were asking me to become an accessory to terrorism in order to protect someone who had tried to murder my dog and spy on my FBI brother. "Cole says the evidence is overwhelming, even without my cooperation," I replied, refusing to be manipulated into betraying my principles. "Amy documented everything herself. Her communications with the extremist network are all recorded. My testimony is just supporting evidence." My father's anger erupted at the mention of Cole's involvement. "This is all Cole's fault for getting involved with the FBI in the first place. If he'd chosen a normal career, none of this would have happened. Now he's destroyed his own sister's life to protect his precious job." The attempt to blame Cole for Amy's choices revealed the depth of my father's delusion about personal responsibility. In his mind, Cole was somehow responsible for Amy's decision to join a domestic terrorism network and attack my dog. "Amy chose to take money from terrorists," I said firmly. "Amy chose to spy on her own family. Amy chose to poison my dog. Nobody forced her to make those decisions." But my parents' response showed they would never accept Amy's responsibility for her own actions. "We raised you both to protect family," my mother said, her voice heavy with emotional manipulation. "Real families stick together through difficult times. If you testify against Amy, you're choosing strangers over your own blood." The emotional blackmail was exactly what I'd expected, but it still hurt to hear my mother suggest that refusing to obstruct justice was somehow a betrayal of family values. She was asking me to prioritize loyalty to a domestic terrorist over loyalty to the country and the rule of law. "I'm protecting Cole by ensuring that the people who wanted to hurt him face consequences," I replied. "That's what real family loyalty looks like." The confrontation that would finally reveal the full extent of Amy's hatred came when she was brought in for federal questioning 3 days after her arrest. Cole had arranged for me to observe the interrogation from behind one-way glass, warning me that what I was about to hear would be difficult but necessary for understanding the true scope of her crimes. FBI interrogation specialist Agent Elias Stone led the questioning with the methodical precision of someone who had broken down dozens of domestic terrorists. Amy sat across from him in the sterile federal interview room, no longer the sweet, manipulative sister I'd grown up with, but a cold-eyed extremist who showed no remorse for what she'd done. "Amy, we have your communications with the Idaho network," Agent Stone began, placing printed transcripts on the table between them. "We have the financial records showing payments for intelligence gathering. We have video evidence of you purchasing the antifreeze and poisoning Bella. Why don't you tell us about your motivation?" For the first time since her arrest, Amy's carefully constructed facade cracked, revealing the seething resentment that had been building for years underneath her surface charm. "You want to know why?" she said, her voice dripping with venom. "Because I'm sick of watching Marie get everything handed to her while I get nothing."
The jealousy that poured out of Amy was more intense and long-standing than I'd ever realized. She gets the successful business, the beautiful house, the recognition, the respect. Meanwhile, I'm living in our parents' basement at 28 because nothing I do is ever good enough. Agent Stone pressed deeper into her psychological motivations. But why target Bella specifically? Why not confront Marie directly about your feelings? Amy's response revealed the calculated cruelty behind her actions.
Because I knew that killing that stupid dog would hurt her more than anything else I could do. She cares more about that animal than she does about her own family. I wanted her to feel the kind of loss I've felt my entire life. The admission that Amy had specifically chosen to target Bella because she knew it would cause maximum emotional damage confirmed everything the federal investigation had suggested about her psychological profile. This wasn't an impulsive act of anger. It was a carefully planned assault designed to destroy my emotional well-being. And Cole's career with the FBI, Agent Stone continued, how did that factor into your decision to join the extremist network? Amy's face twisted with an expression of pure hatred that I'd never seen before. Cole thinks he's so important, so special, fighting for truth and justice like some kind of hero. I wanted him to know what it felt like to be powerless, to watch someone he cares about suffer and not be able to stop it. The revelation that Amy had targeted both Cole and me as part of her participation in the domestic terrorism network showed how completely she'd turned against her own family. She hadn't just been recruited by extremists, she'd actively sought them out as a way to strike back at what she perceived as our success and happiness. The network offered you $5,000 to poison Bella, Agent Stone said, showing her the financial records. But you would have done it for free, wouldn't you? Amy actually smiled at the question, a cold expression that made my blood run cold. The money was nice, but you're right, I would have paid them for the opportunity. Do you know what it's like to watch your younger sister build everything you ever wanted while everyone treats you like a failure? The depth of Amy's resentment was staggering, but what came next was even worse. I've been planning something like this for years, she continued, seemingly proud of her long-term strategic thinking. I just needed the right opportunity and the right resources. Agent Stone leaned forward, pressing for more details. What other plans did you have? If the dog poisoning had worked the way it was supposed to, Marie would have been emotionally destroyed, and Cole would have been distracted from his FBI work, Amy explained with disturbing clinical detachment. The network had plans for escalating attacks that would have forced them both to leave their careers and maybe even leave Portland entirely. The revelation that Bella's poisoning had been intended as the opening move in a campaign of systematic terrorism against my family made me feel physically sick. Amy hadn't just wanted to hurt me, she'd wanted to destroy both Cole's and my lives completely. I wanted them to lose everything they built, the way I felt like I'd lost everything, Amy said, her voice growing more intense. I wanted them to know what it felt like to have their dreams ripped away from them. The final confession revealed the true scope of Amy's hatred and her willingness to betray family, country, and basic human decency to satisfy her jealousy and resentment. The federal courthouse in Portland had never seen a domestic terrorism case quite like Amy's, where a family member had turned against their own relatives to serve an anti-government extremist network. The sentencing hearing drew national media attention as prosecutors presented evidence of a conspiracy that had threatened federal agents across 7 states. United States District Judge Amanda Ashford presided over the proceedings with the gravity appropriate for a case involving domestic terrorism, animal cruelty, and conspiracy against federal law enforcement. Amy sat at the defendant's table, flanked by 2 federal public defenders, no longer the manipulative sister I'd grown up with, but a convicted terrorist facing decades in federal prison. Miss Ashford, Judge Ashford began, using Amy's maiden name rather than acknowledging any family connection, you have been found guilty on multiple federal charges, including conspiracy to commit domestic terrorism, intimidation of federal officers' families, animal cruelty resulting in serious bodily injury, and racketeering in connection with an ongoing criminal enterprise. The list of charges was extensive and carried mandatory minimum sentences that would ensure Amy spend most of her remaining life in federal prison. Prosecutor Sarah Stone had built an overwhelming case using Amy's own digital communications, financial records, and surveillance footage. The evidence presented during your trial reveals a level of premeditation and malicious intent that this court finds deeply disturbing. You systematically betrayed your own family members, endangered national security, and participated in a conspiracy designed to terrorize federal law enforcement officers through attacks on their loved ones. The prosecution had requested the maximum sentence allowable under federal guidelines, arguing that Amy's case represented a new and dangerous trend in domestic terrorism that required the strongest possible deterrent effect. The extremist network she joined had been planning similar attacks in multiple states, using family members as assets to gather intelligence and carry out operations.
Your attack on Miss Blair's service animal was not simply animal cruelty, Judge Ashford stated, her voice carrying the weight of federal authority. It was a calculated act of domestic terrorism designed to cause maximum psychological damage to a federal agent's family member while advancing the goals of an anti-government extremist organization. The federal sentencing guidelines for domestic terrorism cases involving conspiracy and racketeering were severe, but Amy's cooperation with prosecutors had provided some mitigation. Her detailed testimony about the Idaho-based network had led to the arrest and conviction of 43 other domestic terrorists across the country. However, the court notes that your cooperation with federal authorities appears to have been motivated by self-interest rather than genuine remorse, Judge Ashford observed, referring to psychological evaluations conducted during Amy's pre-sentencing period. You have shown no meaningful acknowledgement of the harm you caused to your family or to national security. The psychological reports had painted a disturbing picture of Amy's mental state, revealing narcissistic personality traits and a complete lack of empathy for the victims of her crimes. Even after months of counseling, she continued to justify her actions as reasonable responses to perceived family favoritism. The court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole, Judge Ashford announced, her voice echoing through the packed courtroom. You will serve this sentence in a maximum security federal facility designated by the Bureau of Prisons. The sentence was longer than even the prosecutors had requested, reflecting Judge Ashford's concern about the precedent Amy's case might set for other family members of federal agents who harbored similar resentments. The judge wanted to send a clear message that family relationships provided no protection for those who chose terrorism. Additionally, you are permanently banned from owning or caring for any animals, Judge Ashford continued, addressing the animal cruelty aspects of Amy's crimes. You will pay full restitution for veterinary costs, psychological counseling for the victims, and enhanced security measures required by your brother's continued federal service. The financial penalties were substantial, totaling over $200,000 in damages and costs related to Amy's crimes. The money would help cover Bella's ongoing veterinary care, security upgrades for both Cole's and my homes, and counseling services for family members affected by her betrayal. Upon your eventual release from federal prison, you will serve 5 years of supervised probation, with conditions including mandatory psychological treatment, restricted internet access, and prohibition from contacting any current or former federal law enforcement officers or their family members, Judge Ashford stated. The probation conditions were designed to prevent Amy from re-engaging with extremist networks or attempting future attacks against law enforcement families. Federal parole officers would monitor her activities closely, ensuring she couldn't rebuild connections with anti-government organizations. As court officers led Amy away in federal custody, she looked back at Cole and me with an expression of pure hatred that confirmed she felt no remorse for her crimes and would likely pose a continued threat even after serving her sentence. The months following Amy's sentencing brought unexpected healing and reconciliation, though the process was painful and required my parents to confront truths about their daughter they'd spent years avoiding. The federal investigation's revelations about Amy's anti-government activities and calculated cruelty had shattered their carefully maintained illusions about family dynamics. My mother was the first to reach out, 3 weeks after the sentencing hearing. She appeared at my front door on a rainy Thursday evening, looking older and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. "Marie, I need to apologize," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been reading the court transcripts, and I finally understand what Amy really did." The conversation that followed was one of the most difficult we'd ever had, but also one of the most important. My mother had spent weeks reviewing the evidence presented during Amy's trial, forcing herself to accept the reality of her daughter's crimes rather than continuing to live in denial. I kept telling myself that Amy was just troubled, that she made some bad decisions because she was jealous, my mother explained, tears streaming down her face. I never imagined she was capable of joining terrorists or trying to hurt federal agents. I failed to see who she really became. The admission was painful but necessary for beginning to rebuild our relationship. My mother had spent so many years making excuses for Amy's behavior that she'd become complicit in enabling increasingly dangerous conduct. The federal investigation had forced her to confront patterns she'd been ignoring for decades. "When you were teenagers and your goldfish died, I knew something felt wrong about Amy's story," my mother continued, revealing a truth that hit me like a physical blow. "But I was so tired of dealing with her anger and manipulation that I took the easy way out and blamed you instead." The confession about Neptune's death validated feelings I'd carried for 18 years. My mother had suspected Amy was lying about the goldfish incident, but she'd chosen to sacrifice my emotional well-being rather than confront Amy's increasingly disturbing behavior patterns.
My father's journey toward understanding was slower and more difficult. He'd built his identity around being the patriarch of a successful family, and Amy's conviction for domestic terrorism had shattered that self-image completely. His initial response was to withdraw entirely, refusing to discuss Amy or acknowledge what had happened. It was Cole who finally broke through my father's defenses during a tense family dinner 6 weeks after the sentencing. "Dad, Amy tried to destroy my FBI career and terrorize my sister," Cole said with characteristic directness. "If you can't acknowledge that, then you're choosing to support terrorism over your own children." The confrontation forced my father to choose between continued denial and accepting the reality of Amy's crimes. After weeks of soul-searching, he chose truth over comfort, though the process was clearly devastating for him. "I enabled Amy's behavior because I was afraid of her anger," my father finally admitted during a family therapy session we'd all agreed to attend. "Every time she threw a tantrum or threatened to hurt herself, I gave her what she wanted instead of setting boundaries. I taught her that manipulation and threats were effective tools." The family therapy sessions revealed patterns of dysfunction that had been building for decades. Amy had learned early that emotional manipulation, threats, and playing the victim could get her what she wanted from our parents, who were too exhausted or afraid to enforce consistent consequences. The therapist helped us understand that Amy's progression from childhood manipulation to adult terrorism followed a predictable pattern. My mother explained to me after one particularly difficult session. "We created a monster by rewarding her worst behaviors and punishing you for being honest and responsible." The therapeutic process was painful but necessary for understanding how our family dynamics had contributed to Amy's eventual radicalization. She'd learned that she could escape consequences through manipulation and blame shifting, skills that made her an ideal recruit for extremist organizations looking for assets with access to federal agents. Cole's perspective on the family healing process was characteristically practical. "Amy made her own choices," he said, during one of our weekly check-ins. "But understanding how our family taught her those coping mechanisms helps us make sure we don't repeat those patterns." The most significant change in family dynamics was my parents' newfound respect for boundaries and accountability. They'd enrolled in counseling to address their own psychological issues and were learning to have honest conversations about difficult topics instead of avoiding conflict at all costs. "We're proud of how you handled this situation," my father said during our first family dinner after Amy's conviction. "You stood up for what was right even when it was difficult. That's the kind of character we should have been teaching Amy all along." The healing process would take years, but for the first time in decades, our family was building relationships based on honesty, accountability, and mutual respect rather than manipulation and conflict avoidance. One year after Amy's attack, I stood in my backyard watching Bella demonstrate perfect agility routines for a group of visiting federal agents who were learning about pet security protocols. Her golden coat gleamed in the afternoon sunshine, and her movements showed no lingering effects from the antifreeze poisoning that had nearly killed her. She was stronger, more confident, and somehow even more beautiful than before. "She's remarkable," said Agent Martinez, who had become the FBI's leading expert on protecting federal employees' families from domestic terrorism threats. Her recovery story has become a model for how quickly animals can bounce back from trauma when they receive proper care and support. Bella's case had led to sweeping changes in how federal law enforcement agencies protected their employees' families. The FBI had developed new protocols for monitoring online threats against agents' loved ones, and they'd created specialized units focused on preventing family-targeted domestic terrorism. Dr. Stone had used Bella's medical records to publish research papers about treating deliberate pet poisoning cases, helping veterinarians across the country develop better emergency protocols. "What we learned from Bella's case has already saved dozens of other animals," she told me during Bella's recent wellness check. My dog training business had evolved as well, expanding to include security training for federal agents' pets and consultation work with law enforcement agencies developing family protection protocols. Blair Canine Training Academy for Federal Families had become a specialized division that helped other agents ensure their beloved animals were safe from extremist threats. The media attention surrounding Amy's case had brought unexpected opportunities. I'd been invited to speak at national conferences about recognizing signs of family-based domestic terrorism, and my insights had helped law enforcement agencies identify similar threats before they could be carried out. Cole's FBI career had actually been enhanced by the case rather than damaged. His experience with family-targeted terrorism had made him a valuable resource for the Bureau's domestic terrorism units, and he'd been promoted to supervise a new task force focused on protecting federal employees from extremist attacks. Amy thought attacking our family would destroy our careers. Cole reflected during one of our regular coffee meetings. Instead, her crimes gave us the experience and credibility to help protect other federal families from similar attacks.
The most meaningful change had been in my relationship with my parents. The family therapy sessions had taught us all to communicate honestly about difficult topics, and we'd developed stronger bonds based on mutual respect rather than conflict avoidance. As I watched Bella effortlessly clear a series of jumps, I thought about how far we'd all come from that terrible morning when I'd found her convulsing on my kitchen floor. Amy's attempt to destroy our lives had ultimately made us stronger, more resilient, and more committed to protecting others from similar attacks. "Good girl, Bella," I called out as she completed her demonstration routine. She trotted over to me with her tail wagging, pressing her warm body against my legs in the same gesture of affection she'd shown before Amy tried to take her away from me. We'd survived the worst kind of family betrayal, and we'd emerged stronger than ever.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.